Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and for my cards today I am using some of the new products from the Simon Says Stamp Encouraging Words release. And when I was looking at the new You're a Star die set, and there's like a little planet set, etc., the first thing I thought of was galaxy backgrounds. So I haven't done very many, but I have watched tons and tons of videos over the last couple years on YouTube showing how other people are creating these gorgeous, watercolor galaxy backgrounds. And my favorite thing about it is they never look the same. So I started off with some Strathmore ready cut watercolor paper. It's cut down to 5 by 7 inches. And this is cold pressed watercolor paper. And I have the more textured side facing me, even though it doesn't have a heavy texture. But I have the textured side facing me, and I cut the piece in half, and then I'm taping both halves to just a hardboard panel with some painter's tape, and that'll help to keep the paper as flat as possible so it doesn't curl up really bad, because I'm using quite a bit of water. And then to create my galaxy background, I'm using my Gansai Tambi watercolors. You could use any watercolors, you could use inks. I did think about doing this with distress oxide inks because I think that'd be really fun, but I've been getting requests lately to use the Gansai Tambi more often because I promote them so much. I have so many different watercolor mediums that I'm always jumping around to different ones. So I really like these for galaxy backgrounds because they're more opaque than traditional watercolors. And of course, this whole 36 set, there's tons of colors to choose from. So I have no rhyme or reason to how I'm creating this. I'm literally just picking up the color with a paintbrush. I'm using a silver size 8 brush for this. And I'm basically just tapping the paintbrush. I'm not doing any sort of fancy techniques. I'm letting the colors just kind of blend into each other. I don't worry if they get a little bit muddy or anything like that, because it's not really going to matter. So I was very heavy-handed with the color. You can also do this where you just add color in certain areas and leave a lot of white space as well, because that looks really pretty for a galaxy background. But I wanted color, lots and lots of color. So I did that, and then I sped up the drying process with my heat tool. You don't need a heat tool. You could use a hairdryer, or you could just let it sit and air dry, but I don't have the patience for that. So I just used my heat tool, and I picked up any of the areas that were pooling with a tissue just to, again, speed up the drying process. So I completely dried this layer, and then I'm going in with my black Gansai Tambi color and mixing up quite a bit of it and getting really heavy-handed applying this. And this is where it just looks like absolute garbage. This was what I struggled with the most the first couple times I did galaxy backgrounds. It was like, this looks like crap. It's like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I can't do this. However, it always looks better once you have the splatter. So I'm just going in and heavily applying this black. Some areas I thin out a bit with water. I add water droplets. You want it to be messy. You really do. That's what creates the different looks, and you want lighter areas to see the color through and darker areas and all that kind of stuff. I actually went a little bit lighter with the black. Normally I would probably add maybe more black so it looks a little more realistic-ish, but I really wanted that color to shine through because like I said, I really like the color. So I applied all that black watercolor, and then I picked up some of the excess pooling areas again with a tissue, and then sped up the drying process with my heat tool, and still it looks like garbage. It's like, this is just a hot mess, but that's where the splatter really comes in to tie it all together. So for my first bit of splatter, I'm using the pearly color from the Gansai Tambi set. This isn't white, it's just like a shimmery pearl color, and I just thought that would look so pretty. So I mixed that up, put it on an acrylic block, and just flicked my paintbrush against that to create this fun little splatter. And then this dries back quite a bit, so it's not very vibrant, you don't really see it as much, but that's what I wanted. Because then I'm going to go in with my Copic opaque white, which is just really, really pigmented white paint. The Gansai Tambi set does have a white that is really good, but I prefer my Copic opaque white above all else, because even when I thin it with water, it's still white. So I mixed that up on acrylic block, and then this is where I splattered it heavily all over these pieces, and had, I've got bigger blobs and little tiny fine mist and all that, and that's what really pulls it all together and makes this look like a really fun galaxy. These are so fun, and if you haven't done one, I highly encourage playing around. Use whatever watercolors you've got, but it just, once you get to the very end, 9 times out of 10, if not 9.9 times out of 10, you will be happy with the results. I find if I just stick with it with this, I'm usually happy with it. So once everything was completely dry, I ran it through my die cut machine with one of the Simon Says basic rectangle dies. And then I ran them through again with the new Tickle Breeze die, which die cuts this fun little wavy stitch trail and all the little holes that kind of could be stars or bubbles or whatever you want to make it. So for this, I was thinking stars. So I ran that through with both of those. And then the You're a Star wafer die, I ran through my machine and die cut 2 pieces for each of white cardstock. And then I also ran it through with some silver glitter paper. So I've got all these little pieces, and now I just need to adhere them all together. And I did think about using my stick adhesive, you know, the adhesive sheet that you line on the back of the cardstock. That would kind of save me from having to fiddle with the adhesive. But since I was doing doubles of everything, I didn't want to waste that much of my stick it. I really hoard that stuff. I can't help myself. It's just one of those things. So instead, I just used my multimedia matte adhesive, and I've got the Darice narrow applicator tip on here. I showed that in a haul video not too long ago. Had a lot of feedback on that. A lot of people saying that they have problems with it, that the pin that it comes with has rusted in their adhesive. So far, I haven't had that problem, but I always, and I'll show it in a minute here, I always tap my bottle on my desk surface when I'm done with it to pull all the adhesive to the bottom of the bottle. And then I make sure to like wipe off the needle nut, and I'll show that in a bit, so that the needle isn't sitting in the glue the entire time, if that makes any sense. So I've never had a problem, but I haven't had this very long, so we shall see. But I have used, you know, needles before in my other applicator tip, that Quill Creations one, and at one point the needle I was using did rust, so it obviously happens. But there are other needles you can order, and I'd ordered them the other day, the ones that Jennifer McGuire had recommended, and we'll see when they get here. But so far so good with this and my experimenting with it anyway. So all I'm doing is applying that multimedia matte adhesive on each layer and then stacking them together. So I've got 2 layers of white cardstock, and then the top layer is that glitter paper. So it just gives it that extra, you know, depth and dimension, which I absolutely love. And I'm using my reverse tweezers to help with this. And these I highly recommend. If you don't have a pair of reverse tweezers, highly, highly recommend these ones. I always link to them in my supplies, or try to remember to when I use them in my videos. They're so awesome, and I like the fine tip on them, and then it has that little bit of a cushy grip. So especially when dealing with like smaller die cuts like this, it helps too to be able to hold them in place without getting my fingers in the way, and I can actually see what I'm doing. So I pulled out the envelope that the die cut comes in, so I can use that as my little visual guide as I adhere these to the bottom corner of both of these galaxy backgrounds. So I'm just applying that same multimedia matte adhesive and then pressing them into place. And I purposely chose the multimedia matte this time because if any of it does ooze out, you're not going to be able to see it. It does dry completely matte. Whereas the Nouveau adhesive that I've been using tons the last few months and love, it doesn't dry quite as matte. So I do still prefer my multimedia matte. Highly recommend both adhesives. They're great to have. You always need to have multiple adhesives for different projects. It just depends on what I'm doing, on what adhesive I reach for. So I just went along and applied like really thin layers of this adhesive. You can't tell on camera, especially over white cardstock, but really thin amounts to try and minimize as much, you know, I don't want it oozing out at all if possible, but if it does, like I said, it dries matte. But did all of that, and I even stacked the little apostrophe between the U and the R. I had die cut that because it die cut with everything else, and I stacked it with the 2 layers of cardstock and the glitter paper. Looking back now as I'm doing the voiceover, honestly, that was a redundant thing. I could have just adhered the little, the silver piece at the end without stacking it. No one's going to notice, but I did the extra work and stacked it like a crazy person, you know, holding that tiny little speck with my tweezers and gluing, you know, 3 layers together. Some days I shake my head at myself, but anyway, if you decide to case this card, don't bother with that. Just adhere the little silver one at the end and no one's going to be the wiser. So the stars I didn't stack. Those I just left as is, but I saved all the silver ones because they're pretty and I thought they'd be perfect on the background. And yeah, after I was done all my adhering, I put the needle in the tip after I've like tapped the adhesive down, and then I pull it out a couple times and just make sure to wipe it off to make sure there isn't any adhesive on it. And then so far I've been good to go with that. So like I said, I adhered the stars. There is that cute little planet set as well, the Space Journey die set. I did think about adding those to this because they're so cute and it would look perfect along that little trail. But I thought I had enough going on and I really wanted like the galaxy background to kind of pop on this. But that is an option. I've had people asking me what I would do with those, and I would totally use them on this card because it would look gorgeous, especially like, you know, the rings around the planets, like die cutting those from the silver glitter paper. That would have been fun. So I didn't use them, but it's definitely an option. So I popped those up with foam tape on white cardstock that I had trimmed just slightly larger than the Galaxy backgrounds. And then I die cut some black cardstock with the larger dies from the basic rectangle set. And then adhered those with my ATG adhesive. So I'm just going to adhere all that together. And then for my card bases, I'm using Simon Says Fog cardstock, one of my favorites. I actually just ordered another pack of this because I want to have extra on hand at all times. I just really like this. It's just the gorgeous light gray, kind of a warm gray, but so pale it pretty much goes with everything. So I trimmed a sheet in half, so it was 4 1/4 by 11 inches, and then I'm trimming the pieces at 5 1/2 inches with my Teflon bone folder. I just line them up on my paper trimmer, and I use that groove where you would normally cut, and I just use my Teflon bone folder and run that along the groove, and then fold them closed and press down the fold with the Teflon bone folder, and it's good to go. So I did both of those for my bases, and then for the inside, I pulled out the Simon Says Stamp Shine On stamp set. This came out a few releases ago, and it popped in my head, thankfully, and I was like, I remembered there was a set with like moons and stars and everything. Perfect for this release with these dies. So I stamped the string, stars, and moon along the top inside of the card with the same fog ink. And then for the moon and the stars, I realized while making these that I don't have silver Delicata ink, which I don't know why. I always forget to order it. I have the gold and love it, but I don't have the silver. So I wanted the moon and the stars to be in silver, and I remembered that I showed this, gosh, a year or two ago maybe, by stamping images with VersaFine Onyx Black ink. Because VersaFine takes a little bit longer to dry, I can brush Perfect Pearl's powder in Perfect Pearl, and the mix of Perfect Pearl with the black ink creates this like silvery pewter sort of effect. It's so pretty in real life. And with the first one, I used a little bit too much powder, so I just scraped it off with my brush onto the second card and brushed that into it. Perfect Pearl's powder has its own binder. It's not like Pearl X or other mica powders. Those don't have binders in them, so you need to use something to seal it to the paper. Perfect Pearl's has its own binder, so it binds with the ink, and as it dries, it's not going to rub off. So I let that sit for a second, and then I just brushed off the excess with a Swiffer cloth, and then I've got this pretty shimmery moon and stars on the inside of my card. And then the sentiment is from the same Shine On set, and I just inked that up with the same black. I didn't want that to be shimmery because I wanted the different look with the sentiment compared to like the little moon and stars. So I just stamped that onto the inside of the card with the same VersaFine Onyx Black ink. And then I can adhere the card fronts to the card bases, again with my ATG adhesive, get that lined up, line everything up onto my grid line mat here to make sure everything is straight and even. And press those into place, and that finished off my cards. So I will have a link below the video to my blog post. There will be links to all the supplies used, like there'll be picture links on my blog. If it's in the description box below the video, it's just words. But you can check that out below if you're interested. Thank you all so much for watching and subscribing and thumbs upping and commenting on my videos. I really appreciate it more than you know, and I can't wait to see you guys in my next video. Bye!